but he became very attached to his OUA, to his Vietnam intensive group. So you've continued to be in contact with them around their development?
Yeah, so I'm working with them on their marketing plan and pitch, and but more as a peer support sort of arrangement rather than a major contributor, because obviously I'm here and they're there. And I was also in a CLN here in Australia and want to continue to make sure that I see that through. So I've sort of got my finger in both pies, but all my marks and everything will come from my contributions and everything that I do in this forum here in Australia.
And then we've got Karen, who is wholly and solely based here with us face to face. However, interestingly, has heritage from Vietnam. So a rather interesting group to take with us. So one of you would like to start?
All right, I'll start. So we've not really been given much guidance about what Kevin would like us to talk about. So forgive us if we jump around a little bit and come up with thoughts and of our experiences. But I thought the best way to start was sort of where we started when we first got into Vietnam. And I apologise for those who have been to Vietnam or to many Asian countries and that have experienced some of the things that we went through. But I've been to quite a, I wouldn't say a few, but 2 or 3 different Asian countries, and I found Vietnam to instantly become my favourite country to visit. It's got all of the hallmarks of normal Asian countries that I've been to, where the people are really friendly and accommodating and want to have a real interest in you and what you do, and but it doesn't have the sleaziness that I found in Thailand in some areas that I went to. There was some real genuality to the people that when you talk to them, and I also found that they weren't looking to try and lever money out of you and try and put one over you to try and get money out of you. I found them just amazingly authentic from the moment we first got there. When I first got into the classroom, we went and sat down with our CLNs. And it was like sitting down with a bunch of people who I'd known for many years. There was this instant openness and willingness to discuss relatively personal sort of details in the first few minutes of sitting down, and it was a really comforting sort of environment to sit down and be able to talk to these people without any preconceived ideas or some agendas or anything like that. In some countries that I've been to, and truly in Australia, I've found when you go into a social atmosphere, or even when you start your MBAs here, there's a little bit of positioning when you first start talking to each other. You're working out where everyone is from, and their contribution, I guess, maybe their status and where they sit on the pecking order. Whereas I didn't experience any of that in Vietnam. I just found them to instantly want to communicate with you, find out what you know, and were very willing to share their experiences and their knowledge right from the word go. I just found that really comforting. Shall I continue, or?
I'll jump in because you'll probably. But no, I mean, my experience was very similar. I think really what made the program and made the experience was the obviously the relationships that you formed with the other students. I think what was quite interesting is the variety of different backgrounds that these guys came from. Some French, Australian, obviously Vietnamese, from all levels of working experience as well. Like we had the CFO of Bell Cheese, a very, very large dairy company, a head pharmaceutical person there as well. So a real variety of different people. I think the greatest thing that I got out of it in terms of breaking down some some ignorance, I guess. When you see a lot of students from overseas come to Australia, quite naturally, they're perhaps a little bit reserved because, they're in this different environment. Whereas when you actually visit and travel and learn with people in their environment, just really interesting, engaging, thoughtful, just provoking as well in terms of the ideas and the concepts that we were talking about, the experiences, the relevance of marketing with their own environments, and really discussing the cultural differences between how we might go about marketing something in this country and how they would go about doing it in Vietnam. So perfect example was the Honda case that we looked at in the first week or two of this class. We sort of looked at that over there as well, and we talked about, okay, would that sort of marketing strategy be appropriate in that sort of a cultural environment? So discussions which would be very difficult to have in this Australian bubble that we all live in, and so really, really, really valuable.
My experience is pretty similar to these guys here. For me, I'm very much interested in people's behaviour and how they are and their cultures and what motivates them and stuff. And I sat with the Vietnamese group, so the CFO of Bell Cheese, she was so great to take some time out to take us to Chinatown to show us around. And just learning about, like what motivates them, what drives them, how do they do things, how do they present, how do they, come together and put their reports together, so things like that. I think for me, the biggest insight was listening to the stories of how each person has come to do what they do. So for instance, the guy that has the health fund business, who came along to our little beer club night, his story is actually quite personal, and what he does for his own business is something quite big. Like Harfi's business is helping locals go to different countries to get healthcare because they don't have a lot of healthcare in Vietnam, and the other half is helping hospitals to get funding to build on their hospitals as well. And I was just like, wow, like that's actually something that's quite like big. You're not just benefiting yourself, you're benefiting everyone else. And so for me, my biggest insight was it triggered me to start thinking more about my own purpose, like what am I doing and how do I progress and that sort of thing. So my experience was actually quite transformational, I found.
One of the interesting things we did was something that I've never thought of doing before. Was we went to a cafe, and this was Helen's idea, who's obviously not here today. Where we went to this cafe that was originally set up for people who were still suffering from the effects of the Vietnam War, Agent Orange, and some other afflictions that they had from the Vietnam War, and it was set up as an opportunity for them to come in a very informal environment. They could sit down and have a cup of tea or a cold drink or whatever they wanted, and just have conversations in English. They called it Tea Talk. So we went along to that. I went along twice and thoroughly enjoyed it, which I found really unusual for myself, because I guess when I travel, I'm probably a little bit selfish in that I want to see things, I want to experience things, and I'm always looking for things that, tours or to be able to pay for things. But this was something that I could do for absolutely nothing. It was just a few hours of my time and go along and sit with these people and help them to learn the English language, which I don't particularly have a great grasp on, but it was quite refreshing that I was able to pass on some hints to these guys, because we found the language barrier between Vietnamese and English was they have a tendency to shorten words and drop vowels when they pronounce words. But when you sit there and have a conversation with them and explain to them about elongating the words and the vowels and pronouncing it correctly, it was really invaluable. It was quite intimidating at first when you sat down, and I'm not sure if you guys experienced this the first time, but when you sat down, you were sat in a group of 3 or 4 Vietnamese people, all with varying abilities in speaking English. And it was like sitting down in a media press conference and being interviewed, because suddenly you'd have a question from the right and they were asking you about where you lived and what you did, and before you could finish answering that, there was another question from the left, and it was just firing at you for the first 5 or 10 minutes. And it took me a little bit to realise that I wasn't there for my purpose, I was there for their benefit. So I had to then purposely turn the conversations back to them and get them to explain things and talk to me about their lives and what their experiences were. And it was absolutely fantastic. I've got a number of them from just the 2 short visits that I have that are now friends on Facebook, and communicate with them, and just really brilliant people from all different walks of life. Thoroughly enjoyed that.
I think what was also interesting, it's been about 10 years since I was last in Vietnam, and the development of the country, I think if anybody is interested in forming or taking a step into the Asian economy and trying to find a place to potentially, take a leap of faith and head over there, I would say Vietnam could be the place to do it. It's I've never seen so many, so much, I guess, such a transition in such a short period of time. And, you know, there's a lot of money being moved into the area, a lot of really smart people as well, and great coffee and incredible food. And
How was the coffee?
Coffee's, I love it. Yeah. It's apparently the second or third largest exporter of coffee in the world. So they certainly know what they're doing, and
What did you notice in terms of similarities and maybe some differences in terms of learning style or the way that they collaborated? Because we were in an intense environment, so you experienced a bit of the forming groups, the storming, some CLNs more so, like over Steve's way. There was some clashing of ideas and personalities. Karen's group appeared to be more maybe less loud about how they went about it. So it'd be interesting to get from you what you picked up about learning styles.
My group, they've already worked together for like many times already. So they kind of learnt how each other, like how they work and that sort of thing. The good thing about that is you're able to just sort of get into it really easily and formulate ideas really quickly. Their presentation, they had the sort of like the case scenarios of doing like a target group thing and an interview. They literally just thought about that 10 minutes before they were going to present. And so one of them just said, hey, I got an idea, let's do this. And then the others were like, yep, we trust you, let's go for it. So it was good that they had that. But I guess the downside of that is you don't get to learn from other people, which is what they know and what they've sort of said that they've got to get out of and you know, learn and stuff like that. But I find that the students in Vietnam, they're quite blunt. Like they want information and they ask for it and they want it and they want to get into it more. I feel like they value their education a lot more. I don't know about you guys, but like it just feels like it's a lot more casual, more relaxed here, whereas the people in Vietnam are very into it, because RMIT in Vietnam is actually seen as quite a prestigious university. It's like high end. And I spoke to the pharmaceutical guy, and he said he deliberately chose RMIT because you speak English there. So all the lectures are in English. You know, all their assignments are in English. They have to speak English. And I mean, for us, it sounds kind of silly. I mean, we're speaking English now, but in Vietnam, a majority of the universities speak Vietnamese. They don't speak English. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, and just picking up on that point about how direct and how much they value their education, that there was a real vibe when we're working with the groups, and particularly I found with my group, who a couple of them had worked together and a couple of them hadn't. So there was that forming, storming, you know, norming and performing stages happened really quickly. They were really professional in their approach in working with each other, and we're just so eager to get things done. You know, the communication between them and myself, and it was just constant. You know, at all hours of the day and night, they were just continually making tweaks to presentations. And I found that their approach to the presentations was, I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, but it was slightly different to the way we approach it here. The first few, they actually targeted it as though they were sitting down and talking to a marketing director, and they were giving their pitch and how they were going to do it. And it was just full of theatrics. It was that there was no, well, from what I could see, there didn't seem to be nerves. They must have really good steel poker faces to be able to hide their nerves. But they just seemed to have this air of confidence in the way that they presented, and had no inhibitions about being theatrical throughout that 15-minute period when they were giving their presentations. And it was quite refreshing just to see how easily they opened themselves up and were willing to expose themselves in front of a group that, you know, some of them didn't know anyone in the room before they started, and some of them have known each other for a few years. I thought it was really, it was quite a contrast, not a huge contrast, but just a slight contrast to what we see here in Australia.
Yeah, that was, what I found interesting about that was that they did raise the question to me, do you want a professional presentation, which they saw as being more text and typical slides? And I basically said to them, you know, presentation's about theatre, it's about performance, it's about picture storybook. And the more you do that in marketing, the more you're going to get your message across. And then the comment that Steve made was about they all went away to rooms and they rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. And one chap in particular, the lovely guy from the pharmaceutical company, who's a country manager, so very senior. On the first day, we did struggle to understand all that he was saying because in Vietnamese, lots of vowels, but they're very short vowels. So often Vietnamese people speaking English continue with the short vowels. So I basically just said to all the class, not just picking out him, that if you extend your vowels, the words you're forming will be recognisable by somebody who's English speaking. And then his presentation, he really drove the main thrust of the presentation, the main thrust of the strategies and ideas. And it was very clear. It was as if there were two different people. One who was somebody pretending they couldn't speak clear English on the first day, and on the final day it was word perfect and very clear. But the confidence aspect came through this great sense of taking it seriously and rehearsing. Helen's group was a good example because she had a couple of people who weren't used to presenting, but she basically just said, look, we're all out there, let's try different styles. And I did suggest to them to do some rehearsal in front of a mirror, I think as I may have suggested to you, where you basically take on a character, pretend you're an actor, pretend you're somebody other than yourself, put on maybe an American accent or a British accent so that it removes from a sense of who you are. And so she had a couple of people who hadn't done much in the way of presenting at all, who came across as their best. Nobody read cards, nobody read of everything, everyone knew their stuff. It wasn't word verbatim learnt, but it was message learnt. So that was really interesting, given that we were there until 5:30. We weren't leaving the university until probably about 8:30 each night, because groups were doing their own sort of collective thing. And then they'd go home and evidently did some more stuff while we were out sampling the food. And Nas, what about your experience?
Yeah, sorry, first I apologise for being late. I wasn't sure what my colleagues here said or whatever, but I'll just be very quick. The experience, definitely it's highly recommended. It was an eye-opening for a lot of things. And I've heard Karen mentioning that how serious they take in their studies or what level they are. That actually, it is so true. It is definitely, you feel like, okay, you have this level of academic that you've taken it seriously, but then when you see these guys, they actually full on, definitely, they take things to a different level. It's an experience that I think everyone should try and give a go. It is, we had a lot of different learning from the culture wise, the most interesting thing I've found is the way they actually, their own perspective into things, same things we've studied in this class here in Australia and Melbourne, their own perspective into things, and even the way they ask the questions or put things into it was very, very interesting, and a way that we probably never thought to look at things at the same material. One of the things interesting, as we know, Kevin done his PhD in marketing and sports, and they mentioned something there. I'm not sure if you guys mentioned this before or not, but how sports, they're generally only for gambling. It's just a platform for gambling. I think you cannot really market it to any as community event or as anything like that. It's just purely for gambling and probably associated with drinking as well. So that to me, that was very interesting to hear that. Even though sport, as soccer is the biggest thing there, is really big, but they use it as only a gambling. Gambling equal fun, equal this is the platform that only we use to do. So that was interesting to hear all about it and how they do things. So yeah, no, definitely it's an experience. I highly recommend it for anybody who be able to do it. And I enjoyed being with these guys as well. We definitely got to know each other on a different level and learn from each other's experiences. So yeah.
And I think as Helen mentioned, as Dave was saying too, the place has really developed a lot. She's been there, I think, 2010, 12 and now, and just pointed out that each time she's gone along there, she's noticed significant change, so it's changing rapidly. Yeah,
sure. If you look through the city, basically you'll see a lot of the parts that you can tell has been there for a long time and stuff. But at the same time, you see a lot of constructions coming. You know, construction usually it's a sign of developing cities. There's a lot of Westerners there, a lot of projects happening. The Vietnamese people in general is open to foreigners, very friendly with foreigners. Actually, I spent a fair bit of time in China, but I found Vietnamese people actually are more humble than the Chinese. They're more welcoming, they're more warm than the actual Chinese. I'm talking as a culture, as a business-wise. I find them they're more welcoming. Definitely there's a lot of things happening for Vietnam in the next few years from a business perspective. Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting city, very interesting city, and there's a lot to learn from.
I think one of the things that I certainly picked up is that, you know, when you travel places, you have great times and you have really great relationships with people. You know, when you work, you know, with people from overseas, it's another type of relationship. And just to sort of reiterate what a number of the guys have been saying, if there is the opportunity for you guys at any point to have a learning experience in an overseas environment, it is another form of creating different sorts of relationships and experiencing people in a place in another format, which is of great value. So, you know, just because you've travelled somewhere before, I think, or even worked somewhere before, I think you'll experience something even more different in a learning and an academic context.
And I think that you hit the nail right on the head. It was that difference of going somewhere on a holiday and just with your tourist eyes open, looking around and seeing the sights. We integrated with the students pretty much from day one. You know, by the end of the first day, we had a list of restaurants that we should try out in town, and you know, the good places to go and places to avoid. And we went for our first meal in it was like a very basic. It looked like a beer hall, or you know, that sort of environment where it was very basic. There was just big long tables, and you just sat at communal tables, and you could get beer in all sorts of ways, shapes or forms, in big steins or big decanters and that on your table. And the food on the menu was quite interesting. So day one we were in Vietnam, we're having crocodile, ostrich, goat. I think we had squid. We had frog's legs, beef. But none of us were game enough to try the genitals that were on the menu, because that just seemed a little step too far. But this environment, you know, after all the locals sort of looked at us strangely for the first 5 minutes, we became part of the furniture, and they just went about their business. And you know, we had a great night. It was really good fun. And then, you know, it was an adventure from then on, because you're interacting with local people and getting to understand some of the local sites and the features that you can go and explore, and it just made that so much easier to do. And as a group, it was really enjoyable to experience.
Fabulous. Anything further to add, or that's all right? Fabulous. Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience.
Thank you.
Well, our experience.